mind. You ever jealous? Uh, all right. It's good to be back in our series here, The Path. It's our week number 4, and we're talking about getting help along the way. And I'll tell you what, I have a theory. All right? I have a theory that I'm going to test out on you today that I believe that one of the most difficult things in life is to know what you don't know. Isn't that true? Isn't that true? You think about that? Think about it for a second here. You know, and you probably have examples from your own story. Afterwards you go, I just didn't know. Years ago, believe it or not, when I was younger, I was really, really cheap. Did not like to spend money. I'm loosening up, okay? You know, it's a new thing. Turning 60, I'm willing to spend more money now as I get older with that, but I'm still pretty squeaky, as my wife would say, in that respect. And so I had an issue with a tooth, so I went to the dentist. All right? So I've never been to the dentist before, didn't know them. I just, they found it and said, hey, we need to fill this. So I had gone back to the dentist so they could fill it. I can't fill it right there because they have to come back so they can double charge you. I don't know how that works. Sorry if my dentists are listening. My apologies to you. And so I get to the dentist and everything, and I've decided that, you know what? To save money, I'm going to do it without Novocaine. All right? I'm going to save myself some money, and I'm not doing the Novocaine. So I go ahead and I said, oh, no, I'm not going to do Novocaine. Don't worry about it. I'm young. I can handle this. It's just a tooth. How bad can the tooth thing hurt, right? So they started doing this. He says, now, you let me know when it's too much. Okay, I say, right? Too much. Really? Seriously? All right. So here we're going, and all of a sudden he's going, and I'm going, oh, wow. My hands are on that chair, and I am gripping it pretty good. And I'm thinking, oh, and every once in a while let up a little bit. And he'd drill in a little more and do this and everything. And I'm sweating, It was painful. And but I'm thinking to myself, no worries. I'm saving me some money. Plus, I won't have that droopy, right, when I walk out of the office. I can go eat and do whatever I want. So we get through it and everything, and he does the cavity and everything, and we get up to, I get up to the counter, and the lady says, that will be this amount of money. And I said, oh, no. I didn't have any Novocaine. And she says, oh, that makes no difference. It's the same price, whether you get Novocaine or not. If I would have known what I didn't know, guess what? I probably would have got Novocaine. All right? Anyone have a good story like that? Or can I copy y'all? Yes, you have them, don't you, Mark?
When they took my wisdom teeth out, he knows it. First time he comes back, I go, there's something on him. When he gives me more, he comes back. I go, it's still not numb. I can feel everything you're doing. He goes, I'd give you enough to knock out a horse. He goes, I guess we're just going to have to go on. So he does. He said, it's painful. About an hour and a half later, all that kicks in. I get to work there and I goes, what's wrong with you? I just come to the dentist and I feel really good.
It's a dentist thing, man. I'm telling you. Right? If you knew how you would react, if you knew what you didn't know, you probably would have said, that's plenty.
Yeah.
But, because the pain was still there, right?
I can feel it.
It is. We all have those experiences in our lives, and it's the most difficult thing in life is to know what we don't know and to learn that stuff. You probably face it yourself. If you're a parent, how could you have known that you knew nothing about parenting until the day your child was born? You thought you knew, right? But I remember looking at my wife sometimes, I'd say, honey, and to think it, we were prepared for this. We thought we knew more than most. Early childhood development, education major, those type of things. We should know all these things, be ready for have a child, but it's different. don't know what you don't know. And that's the toughest thing to know with that. You know, if you've ever done any investing, you probably made a mistake or two. How could you have known what you didn't know until you made that mistake? That might have cost you hundreds or thousands of dollars. If you've been in the military service, on the day you reported to boot camp, how could you have known that you knew nothing until your drill instructor so politely demonstrated your ignorance to you? I was hoping Brenda was here for that. Or Delma. With that. You don't know. And we've been learning these days a very simple form for getting from where we are to where we want to be. We're learning that our direction determines our destination. And that getting from point A to point B involves more than just hopes and dreams. It involves a path. And so far, we've learned that life is a series of mid-course corrections, that when we see danger, it wouldn't be prudent to ignore it. We want to take refuge and avoid the danger. We've learned that one of the most common mistakes in determining which fork to take is trusting our hearts. Why? Because our hearts often lie to us. We've learned that one of the easiest ways to make a great decision to ask ourselves, what story do I want to tell about this part of my life? Years later. Years later. What am I going to say? And today I want us to learn an essential lesson for success along the path. And that lesson has to do with figuring out what you don't know. What to do for that. How do you discover what you don't know how do you discover what you don't know that you don't know, so that you will avoid the possibilities? Why did I write that? My gosh. Avoid the potholes, the pitfalls, and the landmines that you never see coming. And unfortunately, Solomon here gives us that advice, doesn't he? He says, plans fail for the lack of counsel, but with many advisors, they succeed. So, how can we know what we don't know? Well, we seek advice from advisors. Specifically, we seek the right advice from the right advisors. But think about this. How good are you at seeking advice? Why do we not tend to do that? Why don't we seek that advice? Well, a lot of times we think that we already know what we need to know. Okay? That would be ignorance, by the way. Or it feels better to have people think that we know where we're going than to let them know that we don't have a clue. That would be pride. Or it's too much work to figure out how to get advice. And that would be laziness. The Bible calls it slothfulness, if you will, which is a word that we don't use very much, but it's very descriptive, isn't it? We can think about a sloth. And so sometimes we make plans without counsel. And those who fail, or at least wind up being less effective than we could have been. At other times, we do get counsel, but we get inferior counsel because we take it from the wrong people. Why don't we seek advice from wise people? Well, it's easier to get advice from our friends, isn't it? Chances are it's going to be more like what we like to hear, right? Or it's easier to follow the herd. Well, gosh, everybody's doing it. When you were a teenager, did your parents ever say, well, if everybody was jumping off the cliff, would you jump off the cliff? That's the herd mentality, right? You're going to follow the herd all your life, son? You know? Or it's easier to copy just what your parents did, what you've had modeled to you. Oh, this is what I've learned with that. Even if, how many of you, when you were kids, and you said, when I become adult, I'm going to do things differently. I'm not going to do it the way my parents did. And sometimes that's maybe a good thing. Other times we realize that they weren't as dumb as we thought they were. Okay? All right? That's all it comes, because we don't know what we don't know. All right? It's that. In his book, The Path, Andy Stanley writes this. Stick with me. It's a little longer here, but let me go through. He says, I am constantly amazed at how resistant folks are to take their cues from people who are where they want to be. But I'm even more amazed at how quick the average person is to borrow a page or two from someone who's never been where he wants to be. How about the parents who parent like their parents and wonder why their kids are turning out the same way that they did? And then there are the couples who treat each other the way they saw their moms and dads treat each other and wonder why they are just as unhappy as their parents were. These are folks who have a good idea of where they want to go or where they want to be, but are confident or content to follow a map used by folks who've never been there. This happens all the time, he writes, among my friends. The great thing about having friends who share your season of life is that you have so much in common. But the downside is they aren't much farther down the road of life than you are. Friends are great for friendship. They aren't so always great for advice giving, and often it is not their advice that gets us into trouble. It's the assumptions we make based on what we observe about our friends. These assumptions become a map we inadvertently follow. I call this phenomenon the herd assumption. The herd assumption happens when you assume that everybody you know is doing something the same way, and it must be right. And if everybody you know is mortgaged to the hilt, driving 2 leased vehicles, and applying for a home equity line of credit, then it can't be all that bad. If everybody you know works 60 hours a week and sees their family primarily on weekends, then it must work out, because that's what everybody's doing. The problem, of course, is that everybody is headed for a similar destination at which no one has arrived yet. It feels safe. Everyone can't be wrong. But it's not safe, he continues. And by the time it becomes obvious that each of those 3 directions leads to undesirable destinations, it is usually too late to do much about it. Taking our cues from people who share our season of life is equivalent to asking for and following the directions of someone who's never been where you want to go. So how do we get good advice along our path? We're all on a path. It's going to determine our destination. What's the secret to good counsel, and where do we find that? Well, Solomon says what? Let the wise listen and add to their learning, and let the discerning get guidance. Wise people listen to counsel and get wiser. Discerning people listen to guidance and get further along their path. So let's take a look at the secret of getting good advice. First of all, it's about knowing that you will always need good counsel. You will always need. No one gets to the place where he no longer needs wise counsel. You know, I read about a comedian the other day who said that he was playing in a small lounge on the East Coast a few years back when President and Mrs. Bush came into the lounge. Mrs. Bush asked the president what kind of sandwich he wanted to order. And W said, "I don't know." The comedian, who happened to be in the small lounge, heard it and he says, "At that point I became a presidential advisor." He suggested the president order the pastrami on rye, hold the mayo. Even presidents need advisors. The first secret to getting good counsel is to be open to it. Wise people listen and add to their learning. He apparently hadn't been there, but the comedian had. Pastrami on rye.